How do you keep childlike curiosity when you're a scientist and you know a bunch of things and you've studied a bunch of things and you're at a planetarium teaching a bunch of things? How do you not let things get in the way?
Oh, so no, you don't have to maintain it. You just have to make sure nothing interferes with it, which is different from having to actively maintain something. So if you have something that's always at risk of evaporating away or fading, then you've got to pump it. But I don't have to pump my curiosity.
Really?
I've had it since childhood. It's the same curiosity you have as a kid, but I just have it as an adult. And I think all scientists have it as adults. That's maybe the only way you can be a scientist, where everything is curious to you. You just, oh, what's that? Oh, I wonder how that works. Almost distractingly curious. And so, yeah, it's there. I just make sure that things don't get in the way of it.
Sure, I'm curious all the time, but I put in things I learned about something yesterday and just go and steamroll the learning process with bias.
Yeah, well, so bias is an interesting force. So you can't expect to live life without bias, but you can live life self-aware of it, or self-aware of the risk of it. Often bias, you don't even know you're biased in a moment that you're being biased. So you would at least have the self-awareness that you can be biased, and then at another time in another mindset, or to bring someone else into the equation and just assess how effective you were in being unbiased, if that's necessary for the thought that you're having.
Sure, like a scientific experiment, the double-blind thing ideally keeps out as much bias as possible.
Exactly. And so not only that, there's the fact that someone else does the experiment who might have a different bias from you, but if they get the same result, then it means you've transcended the bias.
Right, especially if they're trying to prove you wrong and they still get you results.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's got to be a little disheartening if you're a scientist and you're thinking, I'm going to prove this guy is full of it. And you keep doing it, and you're bashing your head against the wall.
And you're just making the results even better.
Right, you're making it more accurate.
One of the problems in science today is there's not much reward for verifying someone else's result.
Sure.
So the person who gets the result first will get the Nobel Prize. The person who verifies it, enabling the rest of us to believe the first result, essentially gets nothing.
Gets fired for not discovering something.
So we would benefit from a shift in the culture in the peer-reviewed scientific publishing universe, but it's still the best thing we've got going in terms of how you would decode what is and is not true in the world.
Thankfully, people are still stumbling into correct results, whether or not they want to find them or not, I suppose. People who fund those things might be less crazy about that, but the people who are running it at least are doing good, still doing science.
Right.
It's still science, even if you get the result that you don't want.
It's still science. Well, provided the experiment is properly designed.
Right.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
You found your calling really young. When you were really, really young, a lot of people, when I went to school, I was one of those kids who went, is there a book full of majors? Because I was told I have to pick one of these, and I'm flipping through the book. And eventually, luckily enough, I made my own concentration out of different subject areas. Very few people do that because it's a huge pain. But that was dodging a bullet of just deciding on business or something else because it sounds good. Do you find that finding your calling really young is an advantage that has shaped your career path?
I took it for granted that I had that interest very young and did not realize how odd that was until college. And just like you said, I'm there in college and half the people are still thumbing the course catalog. And I could have told them, astrophysics is early in the alphabet. You could get to that. Yeah. You could hit that pretty early. So then only then did I look back and deeply value the fact that I could align my life's pistons early on so that they're all firing together. And I guess with emergent electric cars, the piston analogy will rapidly go extinct. Right. So align my electrical currents so that every decision I make can be in the service of that mission statement.
because you were giving lectures on this stuff when you were, what, 15 years old?
My first public lecture, yeah.
I mean, that's bananas.
Was 15.
I think most people in their subject area, they give a talk when they're 35 and they go, okay, I got to learn how to do this.
Oh, yeah, well, it wasn't that I had to learn how to do anything. I was simply talking about what I loved. So if you love something so deeply and you know a lot about it, and someone says, tell me about it, are you nervous? No, you'll just start talking. So now it's like, tell me about it, except there's 50 people in the room or 100 people in the room. So that didn't make any functional difference to me, sharing it with one individual or a room full of people. The difference was when I gave it to the room full of people, they actually paid me.
Right, you got a check at the end and they clapped instead of
saying,
saying,
I was like, I did it without expecting that. They were candid and said, look, this is what we would pay other speakers. And I mean, the subtext was, you're only 15. We probably could have gotten away with not paying you at all, but we're going to pay you because that's what we pay all our people. Yeah, it was basically an infinite. I think it might not have been more than $50 or something, but it felt like an infinite amount of money at the time.
It's somebody just gave you enough money to buy pretty much everything you can wrap your head around.
And all I did was talk about what I loved.
Yeah, not bad.
I felt really cheap. Like, no, the world should not be configured this way. Did I sweat? Did I bleed? Did I? No, it was just an outing. And then I realized that society values knowledge.
Yeah, some parts of it anyway.
Some.
Looking through the course book, thumbing through trying to find a major, if you're trying to help people save time by letting them in work, by suggesting that they select astrophysics, I think the recommendation can be a little bit off. But what do you recommend for people who email, tweet at you? I assume you get this all the time. What should I do with my life? That's got to be a tough one.
What typically happens is it's not so blunt as that. It's a more common example, not necessarily in detail, but broadly, is that someone made a career in a subject that their parents wanted them to go into.
Sure.
They took over the family business. The parents are doctors. They became a doctor. The parents didn't become doctors but wanted to become doctors, so they wanted their kids to become doctors. So they're establishing a career based on forces that they did not control. And so for that category of person, they reach a point where they realize they're not fulfilled because they're not doing what they love. And then I get the phone call.
Right.
Because they like the science they've read about. And typically people have very different range of mathematical background. So nonetheless, there are many places and ways you can plug in to this moving frontier. Of course, if you have high math ability, sky's the limit. But if you don't, there are artists who reach for the universe as their muse, as their creative muse. There are attorneys who are trying to create a new frontier of space law. And
that would be cool.
Who owns this patch of land on the moon? If you get there first, you get to homestead it. Who owns the mineral rights to the asteroid that you paid a mission to go visit? And so, no matter your mathematical ability, there are places you can plug in that still have tremendous value, provided you love what you do.
I used to be an attorney as well, and in part, it's funny you should mention math ability. One of the things I triple checked on before going to law school was how much math is involved in this particular course of study. And they said, oh, virtually none. And I said, great, I'm in. But not really the only decision factor you'll want to look at when choosing a career. Of course, math ability, but maybe when looking at science and things like that.
Yeah, it matters, but there's something that's not widely embraced, but should be, I think, is you get a kid in a math class and they already have some established interest somewhere else, and they'll recite the following phrase: I will never need to know this for the rest of my life.
Right.
Why am I slogging over it now? And I think that's the wrong outlook, because that ignores what hoops the brain goes through just to solve a problem. The statement would be true if learning was, I will learn all the things I need to know to do things I will one day need to do. But that's really not what learning should be, because that ossifies you into whatever were the hot topics at the time you were in school. A more powerful posture would be having had your brain trained for thought and analysis and processing information. And then, if there's a new thing you've never seen before, you will just attack it with vigor. Attack it in a good way, the way, because it's an unsolved problem. And you can't get enough unsolved problems.